Welcome to a very serious brain health and tolerance podcast. Is it better to be white or dead? The tragedy of Richard Biltszto. I'm going to make this real easy for everybody. The world will not be safe for anyone until it is safe for everyone. That is competitive victimization. You do something to me, I got a right to do just as many evil things back at you. I call it boomerang bigotry. We all need to make sure that these evil things, the bullying, the harassment, all this stuff doesn't happen to anyone. Because if it does, that boomerang is going to come right back for you. There should not be acceptable bigotry for anyone. In other words, if you aren't there to stand up for your fellow human when they're being bullied or harassed, then don't be surprised when there's no one there for you when it's your turn. Now, let's get started here. Do you agree that we're all human beings? That racism and bigotry are wrong? No matter who is doing it. No one should be bullied or discriminated against because they are different. In other words, is it safe to disagree with people in your workplace? Do you agree that no one should be stereotyped? That everyone should be able to go to work every day in an environment that is safe? Well, if you agree with these things, then you come and you stand next to me. And we will both go down getting canceled together. Now, those of you who have been in my sessions before, part of this brain health and tolerance series, understand that this constant flooding, when you're being bullied, will destroy your brain very quickly. It's all the adrenaline and cortisol coming from your adrenal glands, which is why your gut tightens up. And 20% of all of that goes to 2% of your body, which is your brain. And when you are being bullied by a person, or when you think your life could be in danger, you release 3 times the cortisol and adrenaline in your system. And that is going to burn your brain to a crisp. Literally burn it and inflame it. And that is how most of us get mental disorders. Now here's a comparison. The brain on the left is a nice, healthy brain with a nuclear brain scan. And everything in blue is the baseline temperature. Everything in red is burning 15% hotter. Now, so you see the brain on the left, how nice and cool that is, and it's just got some nice hot spots to keep it going, which are normal. Look at the brain on the right. Burned to a crisp. That is a mental disorder. Now, I want you to remember these as we start looking at what happened to Richard. All of that turning in his gut, all of that burning of his brain led to suicide. Let me tell you, you've got one fight or flight response in your body. You don't recognize the difference between a punch in the face and a punch in the self-esteem. It gives you the same reaction. It's just a question of degree. That's all. Well, I'll tell you right now, I want you to keep these slides in mind as we start looking at Richard's situation, and you'll see why he committed suicide. And if you want to learn more about how this happens in your brain and how to fix it, look at my website under the free Lunch and Learns and listen to more about the human brain. Now, this is Richard. This is a story from July 21st, 2023 in the National Post. Toronto principal bullied over false charge of racism dies from suicide. He killed himself. July 13th, 2023. Richard's career as an educator was over 24 years. And throughout that time, he was an advocate for anti-discrimination and public education for everyone. He was only 60 years old, and he was literally beaten to death. Now, his sin. What did he do wrong? Well, his sin, in the eyes of the facilitators at the Kojo Institute, was he was questioning their claim that Canada was more racist than the United States. Now, his opinion was, well, Canada isn't perfect, but it still offers a lot of good. All right. And I'll tell you, if you happen to be an American listening to this, you got to be scratching your head because we think, oh my gosh, really? You're worse than us? And I will tell you, my podcast goes all over the world. And I'll tell you, Germany, Japan, Switzerland, France, Australia, the Philippines, Korea, Japan, all over. I will tell you, what he is saying is not wrong. He's not wrong. Now, because she disagreed with him, for the rest of the training session and throughout the follow-up training session the week after that, Miss Ojo Thompson, the facilitator, as well as her partner, Daniel, who is facilitating, repeatedly referred to Richard's comments as examples of white supremacy. The experience was humiliating, particularly because Richard placed a great emphasis on equality and anti-discrimination throughout his career. If he was a white supremacist, this wouldn't have bothered him. This wouldn't have bothered him. And let me tell you, I know this firsthand. I live in Ohio. Now, if you are familiar with the Southern Poverty Law Center, you will understand that Ohio ranks 5th on its hate maps of the states with the most hate groups. California, last I checked, was 1st, then Florida, then Texas, then Pennsylvania, then Ohio. We are loaded. Now, Richard was so distraught that he was not able to finish the training. And a day after the second training session, he fell into a mental health crisis so bad that he had to spend more than a month away from work. It was so bad, he actually won his workers' compensation claim. Now, you see what's happening here? You see the brain? This is what's happening to Richard. This was such against who he was, his moral stance on how people should be treated, that everyone should be treated with respect. All the things that you and I just talked about at the beginning here. Do you agree that no one should be stereotyped and things like this? This killed him. It burned his brain so badly that it killed him. So what the heck happened? What happened? Well, luckily we have an audio recording of everything that happened, step by step by step, in both training sessions. And I want you to listen as to what he is saying and what she is saying. And his particular point, I want you to understand, is that Canada has a better way of funding its schools than the United States. Now, freeze right there. I am an expert in this particular field. Not just that I say I'm an expert. I was at Bricker and Eckler. That is the law firm in Ohio. And there was a guy there, a partner by the name of Nick Pittner, who is actually the foremost authority on school funding. All right. Ohio, the way it funds its schools is unconstitutional for everybody. Because in Ohio, Ohio's Constitution says that everyone is entitled to a decent education. And I'm paraphrasing. That's what it says. Well, in the United States, where you live makes a big difference as to how much money you get to fund your school. That's a fact. I worked on that case. I was fresh out of law school, 1996, and I got to work on parts of this case. And let me tell you, if you work in a school district or live in a school district where maybe it's Upper Arlington, maybe it's Shaker Heights, maybe it's someplace with, that's affluent, lots of money, you have good books, you have good gym floors, all this kind of stuff. If you happen to be in some of these other districts throughout Ohio, some are in the city, some are not in the city, some of these kids in 1996 were studying from history books that said one day we might land on the moon. Now, for those of you who are not history buffs, we landed on the moon July 20th, 1969. This is 1996. So you see the problem here. This is what I want you to listen to, and I will stop this recording every so often and point these things out.
It really doesn't. Richard, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make a comment about the Canada-U.S. thing, and I have a little bit of a challenge on it. I did my student teaching in the U.S. and have spent a lot of time in the U.S. And to say here, honestly, that Canada is not a more just society than the United States is, and we talked about facts and figures. I invite everyone here to do some research, and you look at things. Yeah, absolutely. And look at things like education, and look how you think about a system we have in Ontario where every student is funded equally. You go to the United States, they're funded based on their tax base, right? I see you're shaking your head, but I talk about
what I'm saying,
yeah,
sir, is that what I'm saying, why I'm shaking my head, is that it absolutely matters what community you live in Ontario.
That's not what I said. What I said was...
I'm not arguing what you said. Yeah. What I'm saying is, because I'm talking about the principle of your point. Yeah. It's not about what you said. This is not a court of law. The principle of your point is that you can base it on, well, they have this tax system, and that's true. What I'm saying to you is that what racialized people experience in this province is that it absolutely matters where you live. So it's not. So the fact of the tax system is not untrue. What you're saying is not untrue, but how it's lived out in Ontario is not as you say. It's all.
All right, let me just stop this here for a second. You understand how she's changing the topic here. What Richard is saying is 100% true. So strip everything else away. If you live in Canada, money is much more evenly distributed to everyone, across the board, to everybody. In the United States, people go and rent apartments that they probably can't afford because they could never afford the $500,000 or $750,000 or $1 million homes in New Albany. So they live paycheck to paycheck to paycheck just so there's enough money in the school. So freeze everything else out. If you don't have enough money to fund the schools, you don't have a school. Period. You just do not have a school. And so you see, that's what he is saying here. And he's saying there's this one point where Canada is probably not as discriminatory as the United States because it more evenly distributes the money to everyone than it does in the United States. That is true. And let me tell you, in Ohio, the law firm I worked at, which honestly, I don't brag about the law firms I was at, but I'm very proud of the fact that Bricker Neckler, I was there when this happened. Nick Pittner won his argument 4 times in front of the Ohio Supreme Court. He argued and won that Ohio's way of funding its schools is unconstitutional. And it is unconstitutional. But the legislature in Ohio turned around and said, stick it. We don't care. We are not going to do anything about it. So live with it. So guess what? Over 20 years ago, the Ohio Supreme Court washed its hands and said, we can't really make the legislature do anything it doesn't want to do. And so guess what? We're going to wash our hands of this. And so to this day, what Richard is saying in the United States and certainly in Ohio is that you better choose a good place to live, because we are not going to distribute money evenly to you so that you can even buy a decent book that's been updated in the last 30 years. That's what he's saying. So you want to understand, changing the topic to something else is simply not fair. That is an old lawyer trick. And what we do, give away my trade secrets here, if we're losing a certain argument, what are we going to do? We're going to change the focus of the argument to something else, because we can't win on the argument that you are making at that point.
What I'm saying is that the Jane and Finch kids are not having the same experience as the Forest Hill kids. They're just not. And that's despite our equal laws. So in that way, it's worse, because we have fake equality, or in the name of that equality, kids are still experiencing systemic inequities. Systemic inequity. So that's the point.
I understand when I hear what you're saying, right? However, I think to ignore that fact, right, that we talked about here about, capitalism, socialism, we're very happy here. We have a public education system where everyone is funded the same way. It's not like that in the United States. We have a healthcare system here where everyone has access to healthcare. It is not the same way in the United States. So to sit here and say, all honesty, we're talking about facts and figures, and to walk into the classroom tomorrow and say, Canada's just as bad as the United States, I think we're doing an incredible disservice to our learners. Incredible disservice to our learners. And again, so I want to say that, right?
Thank you so much. What I'm finding interesting is that in the middle of this COVID disaster, where the inequities in this fair and equal healthcare system have been properly shown to all of us. I mean, so it's just so what's fascinating is, and this is why we're in the place that we're in, is that you think, so we're going to talk about anti-Black racism, but you and your whiteness think that you can tell me what's really going on for Black people? Like, is that what you're doing? Because I think that's what you're doing, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to leave you space to tell me what you're doing right now.
Exactly. I just wanted to make the point. You were talking about the United States, and I just wanted to do a comparison. And as I said, you talked about facts and figures, and listening to the facts and figures. And I think if everyone here looks at the facts and figures in all kinds of studies, and you will see we're a far more just society. We have room for improvement. Absolutely. Are we racist and everything? Absolutely.
Richard, this is Andrew from Kojo Institute.
Yeah.
Just to back up everything that Keith has been saying, we're not here to compare. We're not here to say this is worse than the next one. And listen, just, we hear what you're saying, but facts and figures, who did these studies, right? Fair to whom? Just to whom? A Black or Indigenous student in the TSP has the same access to education as a white student, but they don't have the same outcomes, right? Disproportionately affected by streaming. In-school suspensions which are not tracked by the ministry appropriately, all kinds of other metrics. So I hate to disagree with you in this forum, but it's just not relevant what you're bringing up. And unfortunately, the experience of Indigenous, Black, and racialized students in the TDSB, probably in whatever school you lead, are just not good enough.
Okay, let's take a pause here, because this is insane. Andrew, I'm sorry, I mispronounced his name earlier. Andrew is saying we're not here to compare. That is exactly what Miss Thompson did. She said point blank that Canada was a more unfair system than the United States. That's what she said. She is the one who's bringing up the comparison. Richard is sitting here giving one example. And what is one example? One example is, well, I understand what you're saying, but let's just look at the funding for a moment. You see, they don't want to talk about the funding because he's right. It disproves, or at least puts a chink in the argument, that Canada is more unfair and racist than the United States. which this is a ridiculous comparison anyway, because you really need to try to get rid of all the racism. You need to get rid of all the intolerance, and that's the problem. He also throws out about medicine. That is true too. In Canada, everyone has health care. I'm not saying it's better health care. I'm not saying it's worse health care. But you see the points he's making. And then to turn back on him and say, in his whiteness, what's that mean? Okay, if I am sitting there and if I am Richard and I turn back to Miss Thompson or to Andrew and said, and I'm assuming, I don't know what race Andrew is, we'll just assume he's black, and I would say, well, are you telling me this in your blackness? Could you imagine the shockwave that I would feel? And rightfully so. What do you mean in your whiteness? He's not trying to tell anyone what it's like to be black. He's not telling anyone that maybe what she's saying about the outcomes of Indigenous people, of black people, of other folks in Canada are maybe not equal to white people. He's not saying that at all. And understand, this is a guy who spent his whole life fighting to make sure that everybody gets an education, that it's not discriminatory. So you kind of see this is going right to his core, who he is as a human being. And I'll tell you, these are all lawyer tricks, and they're deceptive.
And that's just the reality. So I think if we want to be an apologist for the United States or Canada, this really isn't the forum for that.
Thanks, Andrew. We're going to move forward towards the end of this. What I would say is the teachable moments happen all around us, and as long as we are stuck in the yeah butness and not in the what is it that I don't understand or I don't see here, then it's because what I want to note is you have people around you who are black and well-informed and well-educated and have as much as experience or more that have to deal with that kind of interaction. Y'all aren't going to get far. Y'all need to, part of this work is listening to black people. That has to be a part of it. And really, and if you don't understand what's being said, then ask questions. But when people come with a particular tone and narrative and attempt to shut down the grace that the black community is showing us by even bothering to tell us, we're shutting down the opportunity to learn better and different. That's what I would say. So, what is not your personal experience, remember, as white people, there's a whole bunch going on that isn't your personal experience. It will never be. You will never know it to be so. You will never know it to be so. But so your job in this work as white people is to believe, and if what you want is clarification, ask for that. Truly, in truth, not with the foot in the yeah, but I'm going to tell you how you're wrong. It's the help me understand further, please, because I actually don't know. And so I think that one has to really question a number of things. I think this was a profound and appropriate teachable moment.
All right, lot to unpack there. If just very simple. If I would say those things to a Latino person, if I would say those to an Asian person, if I would say those to a black person, if I would say these things to a woman, you women are not well informed. You women have to start listening. You women, you just don't understand. And if you don't understand, then you need to ask questions. All you women, your job is to understand this. All right, I'm about ready to smack myself. I'm about ready to punch myself in the face. As I say these caustic, toxic words, it makes me sick to my stomach. That's what she's doing, except she's doing it against a straight white male. And so who cares? Who cares? The truth of the matter is, he brought up one point about school funding, and he is right. And believe me, I have studied not just Ohio's system, but guess what? Looking at Canada's was part of my job. I know this area. So I like this. Listening. She's arguing things he didn't even say. She's putting words in his mouth. He didn't say any of this other stuff. I find it very interesting that these are the things he's saying, which is on one point of school funding, and he is right, and she is hearing something completely different. This is like a verbal Rorschach. What you see and what you hear tells me a lot more about you than it does that other person. And what do you mean? It's all white people's job. Why don't we listen to each other? And I will tell you right now, if I was there, the first thing I would do is use my EPR skills. I'm going to listen to what she is saying. And then I'm going to parrot it back. That's where you get a common understanding. We do not move on in our conversation with each other until I repeat what you just said to me and you repeat it back to my satisfaction, and then I'm going to listen to you too. And then I'm going to repeat back to what you said. And we aren't going to move on until I understand perfectly what you have said to me. Tolerance is not a white person's job. It is not a black person's job. It is not a woman's job. It's not a man. It's all of us. It's all of us. This woman does more harm to her cause than she realizes. Clearly, she's not there to listen to Richard and to even to listen to facts that are irrefutable. Irrefutable. When we presented, or when Nick Pittner, I did some research, when Nick Pittner, our partner, presented these types of facts in court, they were undisputed because you can't deny what he is saying. This is like he has done legal research on this, which is probably true because look at what the guy said. This is his area. He worked in the United States. He has been an educator for over 24 years. He knows what he's talking about, and she wants to turn this into something that's racial. It is going to be the end of us as a people. White, black, all of us. We're going to destroy each other. And so the next week, you got some more training coming down the road, and she won't get off it.
I want to jump right, excuse me, most of you came through classroom work in terms of how you got where you are now. And so I hope you can appreciate it when I say that it is rare that when teaching something that you actually get a real live example of the concept unfolding right before everyone's eyes and ears. And we had that privilege last week. So I want to open by going back to the concept of resistance. But one of the ways that white supremacy is upheld, protected, reproduced, upkept, defended is through resistance. And like I said, as I began to speak earlier, I'm so lucky. Who would have thought my luck would show up so well last week, that we got perfect evidence of a wonderful example of resistance that you all got to bear witness to. So we're going to talk about it because, it doesn't get better than this. Let me just see what my next page is before I turn. And we know that we need to get really good at dealing with resistance. So we're going to talk about that next. I talk about obfuscation. Is that the conversation, there was an attempt to derail the conversation, right? Because what I was actually speaking about and saying, we have it on tape, as you all know, we record these, was actually not what was taken up in the argument, right? So there was a sub-argument, like a parallel other whole conversation that was happening where facts were presented. But the intention about the facts was to discredit the point that I was making. If you've listened to what Andrew said, he offered facts to address the question about facts. That's what he did. He had them top of mind. He offered them. And I said to the facilitators here, I said, there's no reason why you can't speak. And I think what's more contentious here in this context is that silence has been such a robe of comfort for all of us that we're not, it's kind of like, this silent sideline watching voyeurism of all kinds of violent white supremacist resistance takedowns. And there's no reason why you can't open your mouth. So I invite you to do your job and address the issues when you see them. And in particular, if you notice, bear witness to, observe adults or children or youth being accosted by white supremacy, I would hope that you would not choose silence in that moment. That would be my hope for people who chose to work on behalf of children and youth for the rest of their lives. But we know the good Canadian way, right? This is actually further part of my point about what the experience is of life in Canada versus life in the U.S. as a Black person. And one of the things that Canada has going is its monarchy-like, polite way of existing, right? So no one wants to be rude. Even in the face of white supremacy, nobody wants to be rude. Permission, control the systems and the solutions. This is what you saw last week, right? I'm going to control what you will and won't say. I'm going to control how you even capture what the problem is. That's not the problem. This is the problem, right? I'm going to give you permission about how you define the problem and what your solutions are. This is the operations of white supremacy, and you saw it with your own eyes. But it cannot be lost that it begins for white people with choosing to unlearn. That's where this all begins for white people, is choosing to unlearn. And where that choice is opted away from or out of, it is then on the institution to respond accordingly.
For the past few months, a former Toronto District School Board principal named Richard.
Okay, well, that was certainly interesting. Think about this. Several times she refers to Richard as a white supremacist. That is, to a tolerant person, that's the worst thing you can call him. That's the worst thing. She says he was trying to derail. No. You said that the systems in Canada, that Canada is more racist and more unfair and more discriminatory than the United States. He offered you one very factual example of where that just is not true. Now really think about it. Do you really think you could compare many countries and say someone is better in everything? No. Yeah, Canada might be worse than the United States in some things, but when it comes to school funding, it certainly is more fair. And look what she does. You kind of see how this type of approach is killing DE&I and why it's getting canceled all over the country, here in the United States and in Canada. The learning begins for white people. Really? Really? Isn't that a stereotype? All white people? Last I checked, every human on the planet is related, and we all come from East Africa. We all are related, and we all share the same central nervous system, which means the same type of brain, the same brain. We all have subconscious thoughts. And if you don't believe you have a subconscious, think about it next time you sleep in the fetal position. or semi-fetal position. Where did you get that idea? Yes, you have subconscious memories from the womb. So we've all got them. And a baby culturally binds him or herself to the community to which they're exposed and the thoughts and beliefs by the age of 9 months old. So guess what? Every human on the planet has biases and prejudices because they learned them before their brain was fully formed, and it goes into their subconscious, and that starts at minus at least 3 months. This is what happened to Richard. Now, picture yourself sitting there, and you're hearing all of these things said about you, and you're a decent person. You don't belong to a hate group. How would you respond? And what do you think is happening in his brain? How much sleep do you think he was getting? Was he eating? This was a bullying attack. Shortly after he took his leave, his Association of Education Administrators was so outraged that it asked the board to investigate the bullying incident. But the board refused, wouldn't even look into it. When Richard returned to work, the board further refused to reinstate him to the role he was in prior to taking leave. It revoked a work contract he had been awarded for the upcoming year. And to make everything worse, the board disinvited him from attending the graduation ceremony with his students. And this is a guy who bonded with his students. No one's going to support him, or very few people, because no one wants to be seen as a racist against black people. A racist against white people? Well, sure, they deserve it. Just like Miss Thompson told you. We're the ones who have to learn. We're the bad people. We're guilty. Anybody hear some stereotyping and racism coming out there? Now, really understand what is happening here. The lack of due process, the lack of fairness, the lack of justice. The board refused to investigate Richard's bullying, but it still made all of these decisions against him. Clearly, the facts only get in the way of a good opinion. The facts don't matter. Whatever happened to Walt Whitman? Be curious, not judgmental. Investigate. Actually find out what is happening before you make a decision. Well, again, the issue here has nothing to do with the facts. It has to do with the emotions of politics. And since Richard is a straight white male, he was disposable. Now, this is amazing. Instead of offering some support to Richard and protection in these training sessions, the school board distanced itself from him. Nobody wants to get close to that. Nobody wants to be a racist against blacks. One colleague, Cheryl Robinson Petrozzini, who has since been made an education director in the district, thanked the facilitators for modeling the discomfort. Okay, how about that? Isn't that something? Thank you for bullying one of our people to death. These words ring in my ears. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I'll tell you, I am trying to see things from their point of view, but I honestly don't think I can bend that far. Now, this is her website, and I just love this. I underlined some things for you. I'm getting good at that. Inclusive change drives people. Where's the inclusion? I don't see everybody being included. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody. White people, black people, Asian people, Hindus, Muslims. They want to deliver equitable outcomes, improve your culture, and produce transformational results. And they use there are anti-oppression consultants. Be careful when you are using a DE&I professional. Just like anybody else, you don't know what you're getting. Now, check out this diagram to fully understand what happens when you become a radical, when you hate, when you attack. Our Nazis over here to the far, 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 far radical right. And it's not just Nazis, it's Klan. It's any hate grouper. All right? They swing their fist 180 degrees to the right and attack. That's what they do. And people are attacked and they die. But look at the left. Don't we have a situation here where someone from the far, far left is swinging their fist 180 degrees and they go halfway around and people are attacked, they're canceled, and they die? What's the difference? Hate is hate is hate. And we feel fully justified, whether you're on the right or the left, to use such abusive, hateful tactics because, well, they started it. Choose your enemies well, lest you become just like them. Has the world lost its mind? To quote Peter Finch, I am as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And if you want to see an end to this hate against anyone, you need to go to your leadership. You need to tell these DE&I people who profess this hate and the HR people who back them up. You tell them, I am as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take hate against anyone anymore. We all need to come together to build safe workplaces, and this hate against anyone stops now. Well, let's finish up where we started. The world is not going to be safe for anyone until it is safe for everyone. Well, if you would like to talk about how to put a safe, real inclusive environment in place that does not exclude anyone, but makes it safe for all humans, shoot me an email or give me a call. And if you want to learn more about these topics, just go to my website and hit the free resources Lunch and Learns tab, and you will find a lot of videos there for you to watch. And sign up for my free Lunch and Learns. We talk about something related to human resources, tolerance, or brain health every month. So until next time, all take care and look out for each other because we're all humans.